Today is an exciting day. Yesterday, we finished writing the names of all of our patrons in the hull. And also yesterday, this pallet showed up, which is all of the insulation that we're going to be installing on UMA. So today we're going to break open this pallet and start doing some tests and start beginning the prep to finally insulate the inside of our boat. First time ever doing this, so we're making it up as we go along.
I really like the smell of this.
It does smell good. There's a pretty steep learning curve. So we have decided to do like an insulation system. It's going to be multi-layered and multi-part, and it's going to mostly be cork. We were inspired largely by our friends at Sail Hub, Chris and Jenny, who insulated their van with spray cork, and also they're planning to do their aluminum boat the same way. And so we have a whole bunch of spray cork here, and we have some cork panels that we're going to be gluing in as well. But before we get started with all of that, we need to do some tests to make sure that the adherence is right and the consistency is right and our plan is actually going to work. So today we're going to be running those tests before we actually do anything inside the boat. So we've decided to go with cork insulation. It's the least toxic version of insulation that exists. It's also very natural, and so it has some really interesting properties, like you don't need a vapor barrier. It sort of acts like a vapor barrier. It sort of regulates the humidity. There's a lot of really good reasons to use cork. In the past, we had no insulation and we had some condensation issues. And then we glued in some like EVA floor tiles, which were actually pretty similar in thickness. They were like a little bit thicker than this cork. And that worked okay. It definitely helped reduce the condensation and it kept the boat a little bit warmer while we were in Norway. However, there was gaps in it. It was just sort of contact glued onto the hull, so there was some condensation behind it. It was cheap and it worked, but there's definitely better solutions. And since we're doing this whole thing from the ground up, we're trying to go with the best solutions possible. There's sort of three options that we know of that we sort of considered. One was the Armisil type foam that we put in the truck, which is just like a squishy black foam with an adhesive backing. That stuff works pretty well. It's really easy to work with. It's kind of expensive, and some versions of it can off-gas some potentially harmful vapors. However, it's not very durable, and so putting it in cubbies and stuff, you still have to protect it with something. Otherwise, when you put stuff in there, it's going to chip and grind and peel away at that foam because it's very soft. The other version is spray like polyurethane foam, similar to the foam that we've been installing in the bilge and in the rudder skeg, like an expanding foam. They use that a lot on aluminum boats, and it works quite well, but also there's some off-gassing. It's, technically not so great to breathe in the fumes from that, and as well as the fumes that it sort of releases over time. It's also quite messy. We just weren't feeling it. It's probably a good foam to use, but we just decided not to use it. So what we ended up deciding was spray cork. Spraying the cork on is quite easy to apply. It's mixed with a water-based PVA glue and some other proprietary components. You put in a big hopper gun like that, and you just spray it away with an air compressor. However, the spray cork itself doesn't actually provide much insulation, much R value. You need thickness for that. What it does is it creates a vapor barrier and it creates a thermal bridge so that you're not getting that condensation buildup when you have like cold outside, warm inside, humid air, all of that. So we are also adding 2 layers of this 1 centimeter thick expanded cork to give us that R value that we need. And then over top of that, we're going to do 2 more layers of spray cork to seal it all up. And then theoretically, we're going to be laying in a layer of fiberglass mat into that last wet layer of glue. And that's going to create a pretty durable surface. That's the plan. We need to test all of that to make sure it's a good idea before we do the whole boat with it. So that's what we're doing today. I've previously glued up a piece of cork onto this like old piece of test that we did with the vinyl ester to act as our hull. It's only 1 layer, not 2, but we don't need it to be 2 because this test is to spray some of the spray cork on top of it, see how well it sort of fills up all the gaps and cracks, and then to lay in all these different weights of fiberglass to figure out which thickness is going to work best The thicker one's probably going to absorb more glue. The thinner one's not going to be as strong. So we've got 25, 50, 100, 200, and 280 gram cloth. And we're going to be testing all of that to see which one we like the best before we order a bunch more of it. We're also going to be testing the consistency. This stuff comes a little bit thick, and you're supposed to kind of cut it with a little bit of water to get it sort of like a wet yogurty texture. We're going to make sure our air compressor is strong enough. We're going to do a test on the hull to make sure that the adhesion to the primer is good enough. And then tomorrow we'll know the results of all that, and then we can actually start corking and insulating the inside of our boat, which is pretty cool. So that's the plan for today. We're going to test all that now and see how it goes. You doing a sniff test?
It's weird. I really like the smell of this. You can tell this is like 100% natural cork, as opposed to the things you get, you know, from Amazon where it's bleached and they glue it together. And this is just, it smells so good. It smells like a nice cozy campfire in the middle of winter with a hot chocolate on hand. It smells like a camp stove.
It does sort of have like a charcoaly smell. Mm-hmm. It does smell good. I'm curious. We're going to find out before this video is over why it's a much darker color than the typical cork that you see on a cork board. It's called expanded cork, so maybe it's expanded with fire. We're going to find out.
That doesn't smell as good.
This smells like wood glue because that's basically what it is. It's so the spray cork we decided to go with is made by a company called Sea Cork. They're a French company. We met them at Metz, and they make a proprietary blend that is proven and known to work on boats in a marine environment where it's very humid. Spray cork insulation is a very common thing in the world. People use it on residential and commercial, on boats. There's a lot of different flavors of it out there because the basic principle is the same, but every company sort of has their own proprietary blend. You can mix your own recipe. I think the guys on Odd Life did that in their van. So it's definitely possible if you have the time and the patience and there's a little bit of risk in that. Like, these guys have done this for 20 years or something. So they've got a long-term track record of it working. If you do your own mix, you got to test it. You got to make sure it's going to stand up over time. It's not too brittle. It's not too flexible. The adherence is good. It's not just PVA glue. There's usually a couple of other ingredients in it to make it work better. So we decided to kind of play it safe and go with a company that does this professionally. In here is just a bag of little cork granules mixed with some PVA glue and some other fun stuff. And we're going to dump it out and mix it up to be the right consistency, and then see what spraying it is like. That's another thing we like about this spray cork is that it's pretty non-toxic. Like, the cork is obviously a natural material. The binder that they use to hold it together is PVA glue. It's like a waterproof wood glue, basically. We're still gonna wear a mask just because I'm sure there's gonna be some particles, but you can clean it up with water, and then once it dries on the hull, it's pretty much waterproof after that. And a lot of the moisture gets dried out of it too. So it's a bit heavy now, but once it's dry, it's much lighter when it's actually on the hull. All right, let's dump it. You get it all out. We're gonna roll that. A tube of toothpaste. Yes. Goopy. Yes.
Gooey.
All right, we've mixed in about 600 or so milliliters of water, and it's kind of like a nice creamy yogurty texture. So we're gonna give this a try and see if it's the right consistency. If it's too thick, it's not gonna spray. So I don't think it's too thin yet, but we'll give it a try and see what happens. Yummy. All right, now that we've got it sort of mixed up, we're gonna just do a little test to see if the consistency is right. We might need to add more water. We'll see. Yeah. I think that actually works. Imagine if it's too thin, it would like ooze down. It's pretty good actually. It's coming out pretty hot though too. I think I want to back the
Oh, like too much.
like fast. I think I want to back the air down. Yeah, I like that better. All right. Interesting. It's messier than I was expecting it to be. I might need to dial the air pressure down a little bit. It seems to just be like blasting it out. So we may still need to do some experiments with that. The consistency seems to be okay. But we're definitely going to like mask off the bugs. It's spraying cork everywhere. So now let's do, where's the fiberglass? Now let's do that fiberglass test and see theoretically which one of these is going to absorb into the glue the bestest. It's pretty durable on its own, but the glass should sort of help smooth the texture out a little bit and make it like a little bit more impact resistant if we're like putting it in the cubbies and stuff where we're gonna be dropping and storing stuff. It's just a theory, but we'll see if it works. People at C-Cork recommended it's a possibility, but they didn't have a suggestion on the thickness of glass, and also I just have no idea what to expect. So we are just winging it and seeing what happens. So it's my hope that the glass gets absorbed by the glue and the whole thing becomes like a nice sort of matrix. It isn't like structural, but it's my hope is that it's gonna help with the durability. So this test is to see like which glass absorbs the glue the best and creates the most durable surface at the end. We're not using like resin or anything because it should be strong enough without that. This is just one coat of the cork, so the second coat will have a better coverage and probably a smoother texture. But this is really just to see like what it's like when it's dry.
How long do you think it's gonna take to dry?
It's a good question. I mean, in the boat, we've got good heating and it's not very humid in here. Since it's a PVA glue, it does, like, the drier the air, the faster it'll dry. I'm hoping like 4 to 6 hours. We'll probably leave it at least overnight to make sure that it's like fully cured, and we'll see what it looks like tomorrow. We're gonna do one more test, and that is a adherence test to the hull because we've got an epoxy-based primer. So we're gonna take the last little bit that's mixed up and spray it somewhere and just see how it sticks to hopefully make sure that it's like bonds to the hull really well. And then we'll be done testing for today. We mashed off this little area behind where the head's gonna be. We scribbled on it with some Sharpies, similar to what we did with all the names on the hull. And I put a piece of painter's tape down the middle. So we're gonna spray over the whole thing with a single layer. And then once it's dry, come back, peel all the plastic off, and then take this piece of tape and kind of peel it off and see if it like rips out the cork or if it takes the cork with it off the hull. And we'll be able to like kind of scratch and mess around with it and see just how well it sticks. Yeah, so that's the plan. And we're gonna see if that Sharpie messes it up at all. I hope it doesn't. But like,
it's a little bit late.
We're real ashamed to have to wipe them all off again. like 2 days worth of work. All right, yeah, let's do it. All the names are on, the hull is clean. I just finished sort of like pre-masking off the areas, as in masking the edges of where the insulation needs to be. So now all that's left to do is to add plastic from that tape out to cover all of the primed bulkheads, because as we found from our tests, the little particles of cork sort of like bounce and splatter, and since they're covered in glue, whatever they stick to, they kind of stick to. So we now need to cover every surface on the boat that we don't want covered in cork with plastic. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it because we have to do 4 coats of spray and 2 layers of glue and insulation. So the plastic's going to be up for many days while we go through and spray. We also found out from our test that it needs about 24, maybe even 48 hours to fully dry on the hull before we can do the next layer. Places that were a little bit thicker definitely seem to benefit from 48 hours, so 2 days in between coats. Even with the big aircon drying out and heating it up in here, it still takes a while for it to dry. So a lot of plasticking to do, and then we'll get to spraying. So it's been 2 days since we sprayed our initial tests. Obviously this section where I just sort of like dumped the gun is too thick to dry, so like inside of it is still not cured. But that wasn't really much of a test. But that's why we have to spray it on in thin layers, because it can only go on maybe like 1 millimeter, maybe 2 millimeters thick. If it's too thick, it won't dry. Because it's like an air-based drying agent. It's not like a 2-part, so it's not going to cure, so to speak. But the main test was the fiberglass board that we did to see if there's going to be any sort of benefit to putting fiberglass over top of it. But to our sort of surprise, the cork itself is like, it's kind of like a rubbery texture almost, because the glue has a something mixed into it, so it doesn't get super hard. It stays sort of like rubbery. Like you can kind of poke the cork and it doesn't really come apart either. And if you poke the fiberglass, it also doesn't really come apart. But it doesn't dry like hard like we were expecting it to. Obviously that one's a bit too thin because I can poke holes in it. So I'm not sure there's gonna be too much benefit to putting fiberglass in there. It does definitely make somewhat of a smoother texture, but not smooth enough that, like, it still kind of looks bumpy, if you will. This one's probably the smoothest out of all of them. But I think in the storage places, in the bilges and in underneath the V-berth, if we're concerned about whatever we're storing in there, like bumping up against the hull and maybe damaging or digging into the cork, we'll probably just lay down some like outdoor carpet or something in there to have a protective layer. But I don't think we're really gonna need it because the cork is sort of soft and it bounces back, and the spray cork on top of it is also sort of like a rubbery texture. So I think we'll probably be all right. We just have to finish masking today, and then we'll spray our first layer of cork. And I think we're gonna probably leave it for 2 days in between each layer to make sure it has a good chance to dry. So it's gonna be a pretty long process. First layer, wait 2 days. Second layer, wait 2 days. And then gluing in all the cork panels, spraying that, waiting 2 days, spraying the final layer. But it's gonna be good when it's done. And it's gonna be super sealed up, and we don't have to worry about any condensation issues behind it. So it's gonna be good.
What about the test and the...
Oh yeah, we need to check the adhesion in the head. And also unmask this, remask it. All right, so this is one of the sections why we wanted to wait 2 days, because like down here was like a little bit too thick probably. The glue wasn't dry in 2 days. And you can still see some of the Sharpie behind it, so let's see if it like comes off easier. Oh, yeah, it feels about the same actually. So it's kind of gummy along the edge, so we'll probably slice it with a razor blade when we peel it off. Maybe not. So far, the tape is coming off well. It leaves a pretty clean edge, which is good. Thought we might have to razor blade it off, but I think it's gonna be fine, especially on the edge. So this is just an initial first layer, so you can still see like the hull through it, which is also fine. All right, let's pull this one off the middle and see what that looks like. I'm hoping that this has a nice clean edge as well, and it doesn't just peel off. Yeah, nice. About as successful as an adhesion test could be. Like, you can scratch it off eventually, but it's really gummy. And after, you know, more time to dry, it might stick even more. It's kind of hard to tell. First time ever doing this, so we're making it up as we go along. Yeah, it looks good. Let's plastic the boat and get to spraying. Also, thanks to the power of the thing called the internet, we found out why this cork is a darker brown color and has sort of a charcoal, earthy sort of smell. This is called expanded cork, and it's the same bark from the cork tree, which Sardinia is full of. However, expanded means that they heat it up, and some natural resins inside of the cork bark also heat up, and that's actually what binds it together. Unlike a typical cork panel like the light brown one, which uses glue to hold it together. So there's no glue in this actually. It's a completely 100% natural material, which is pretty sweet. It does mean there's some little imperfections and holes in it, which is fine because the spray cork will fill in those voids as we go over with the final layer and trap in any amount of air that's in there, which is kind of the point of insulation, is to trap air between two surfaces. So this is all just like a natural binding agent that's naturally found in the bark of cork. So that's pretty cool.
We are done masking everything. I just went and did one more round of wiping everything down just to make sure we remove any dust particles that may have settled. And now we're ready for the first layer of spray. So this is the hopper gun that you can buy from Seacork. It's kind of like an HVLP gun or a normal paint gun, except it's got a big giant 0.6 millimeter hole in the front. Nope, 6 millimeter hole in the front. And you put a big tub on top that you put the cork mixture in. As is, it's kind of meant to do like the exteriors of buildings and like big flat open surfaces. It's not very good for up and around and inside of a boat where we need to do multiple different angles and multiple different locations. So I've modified it a little bit to hopefully make it easier. First thing I did was put a regulator on the bottom of it from our paint gun. And that way I can control the pressure from the gun rather than from the air compressor. The other thing I did was add a piece of PVC water pipe on the outside, because the adapter that it comes with, it's a standard just like 40 millimeter adapter to put this hopper on the top of. But then you have like a gun that looks kind of like this, and it's kind of big and bulky, and you can't really move it around or get into tight spaces. So I added that little piece, just cut the end off of the piece of pipe that we use for all of our vacuum cleaners and putting all our power tools on. And then added a piece of flexible drain pipe for like underneath your sink. And then that, now you can just smush that in the top and then hold the hopper gun like out of the way, and then hopefully theoretically be able to use the gun down inside all these different angles while it's still feeding material down through it. I think in an ideal world we'd be using an airless sprayer, but I don't know if those exist for this thick of a material. They probably do, but then it's like $3,000 or $4,000 piece of equipment, where this costs $1.50. So hopefully it works. We might have to mix it like a tiny bit thinner to get down through this pipe, but we'll experiment and find out.
It's like too thick. It's not gonna go down through the hole. I like this better. It has like a little bit more liquidy sort of consistency.
Closer. You're gonna have to kind of like follow me. I don't know if this is gonna work or not. I'm probably gonna test this outside. It doesn't have enough suction to like pull it out. Yeah. Let's take this out.
Hold it, I'm gonna turn that first. Maybe we put the original thing back.
I hold it down too. Yeah, it either needs to be more liquidy or that tube thing's not gonna work. I like that consistency, but I think that tube's probably too small. That's fine, we don't have to dump it all. Now flip it around and hold it, so it's not gonna leak.
Yeah, it's clogged in there. Maybe it's still too thick.
Yeah, I think it is.
Cause like it's
It's
not,
not-
it
it's
should
not
be
coming
like,
out
it should be
exactly.
like oozing down normally, right?
Alright, let's try a little bit more water.
All right, well, that test with this little guy, oops, didn't turn out as we expected. So we're gonna try again, but we're gonna try to mix it a little bit thinner. See if it works. If not, we'll just go back to the original plan, which was just to use what that thing came with.
It's gonna be impossible to get down in the smaller sections though.
Yeah. All right, little crooked, but whatever.
Alright, I'll hold that up.
Yep. This bin, I think.
I can't go uphill, I have to go all the way downhill all the time. Okay, we gotta dump this out.
Okay.
Okay, well, that didn't work. So, back to the drawing board. We're just gonna use the
Put it back the way we found
I'm
it.
just gonna use the pipe that the thing came with, and we're just gonna make it a little bit more challenging because then going inside of all these upside down areas is gonna be a little harder. But I'm sure we'll figure something out. This is what we get for trying to be clever.
Well, someone needs to come with a better design for this. This is kind of a system.
Let's try this again.
It's weird, it's like the air just like dries it out immediately. and then it gets clogged up in the gun. And this is like, I think, too liquidy.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, so you mix it, see, and it disappears.
Yeah.
Yeah. That should be about right. So I just drop your pressure, mate. The only other thing will be what size nozzle have you got in the gun?
It says 6 mil. It's the same gun that Seacork sells.
Yeah, fine. That's fine then. Yeah. So it should just be pressure, mate. That's all it will be.
You don't think that it's the fact that we mixed it up and added some water like 2 days ago, like the cork doesn't expand or anything, or there's too much air in it or something like that?
Basically, the PVA that's in it is the only thing that could do that. And basically, with PVA, unless it's gone hard,
Yeah.
it's re-emulsified by water anyway. So
Right.
it's basically an emulsion, so you can continue to mix it. It's no issue. All right. Well, good luck, guys.
All right, thanks,
we'll
man.
Catch up.
See ya.
Catch up.
All right, so just got off the phone with Chris because they did their van and went through a lot of the same trials and tribulations that we're going through with the same product. So, and the instructions it says we need 4 bar of pressure, and he was saying that's way too high. He found like 1 bar to be better. Because the problem that we're having is like when we open up the gun, it sprays for a little while, but then like the air going past the product dries it out before it has time to leave the nozzle, so it clogs it. So we're gonna try a much lower pressure first, and also added like a little bit more water to make it more of like a kind of a creamy texture instead of a yogurty texture. So between the two of them, hopefully that works. If it's too thin, that just means we have to put on a thinner layer, because if it's too thick, it'll sort of like slough down, which just means we have to do 3 layers in the deburth or something first. So we'll see. But round 2. Also, this is insane overkill because it's just wood glue, but the little specks of it bouncing back in my face get underneath the safety glasses, so that's annoying.
You mean round 8? Round 2.
Round 72.
Well, I mean, we figured it out.
Definitely not the prettiest thing I've ever done. I guess we'll see when it dries how it looks.
So, first layer's done.
Yeah, so we're not the first people to do this. People have been spraying cork inside boats for decades. This product's been around for a long time. However, it's the first time we've done it, and so there's a pretty steep learning curve. We did what we thought was an appropriate amount of testing, and we thought we had a good consistency. It wasn't a long enough test to run into the issue that we were having. So the issue we're having is that the main binder in this product is basically PVA glue. It's wood glue. It's like think Titebond 3, like a waterproof wood glue, and it dries via air. And so with a lot of air shooting past it, it was like drying out what was in the gun. It was like pushing out all the glue and not pushing out any of the cork. And so we get like this big sort of like dried ball of cork in there that would clog the gun up. the directions that we were given were like 4 CFM for 4 bar of air pressure and to mix it to like a Greek yogurt consistency. Now, the Greek yogurt that we eat is like sour cream. It's like it holds its shape. There's other Greek yogurts that are much thinner than that. We called up our friends Chris and Jenny from Sail Hub, and they said that they found the best consistency was more like a heavy cream, and they were running at like 1 bar of pressure, which is also what we found. At 4 bar, it was just hitting the side of the boat and blasting off, and we were getting huge amounts of overspray, and it was just too powerful for it to even stick. So we dialed it way down to like probably half, 3/4 of a bar, almost 1 bar of pressure, and we mixed it pretty thin. And the issue we had with the first bucket was I think it was too thin, because we've got areas where it's like sloughing, and like a lot of the glue that's like too liquidy is sort of like running out of the cork, which I guess isn't the end of the world, I hope, because there's still enough for it to bind to the hull. We'll figure that out in 2 days once it's all dry. But there's a lot of like runoff, big puddles of wood glue on the floor. The second bucket we mixed slightly thicker, and it looks like it's holding and sticking to the hull better. But the issue we were having is it was clogging the gun. So we had like a stick in there, and you'd like spray for 4 seconds, then have to like smush it around with a stick and spray and unclog. We had to like keep unclogging the tip. So I don't really know what to make of that, because it's not like we made this up. This is the tool that the company recommended, and this is the product and the consistency. So I know that 99.9% of sprayed on cork in the world is sprayed onto buildings for insulation, for noise, for condensation reduction, on roofs. There's a lot of companies out there that spray cork on a lot of different things. So they're using that same gun, but they're using it like standing up in front of a building. They're not using it like up and under and around and trying to get in all these little tight places. So it's really not the best tool for this job. It needs to have like an auger or something in it to keep like the product moving rather than just relying on gravity. We're gonna have to figure out what to do down inside some of these compartments that we thought we were gonna be able to get the gun inside of. And hopefully next time probably mix it a little bit thicker and just deal with the clogging nozzle.
Yeah, because the issue is that you have to hold it vertically, right? So
Yeah.
you can't kind of lay down.
It's a gravity-fed device. That's why I thought that extended tube was going to be super nice. And now that we're mixing it so much thinner, maybe the extended tube would work, but the problem is you have to like jam a stick down inside to unclog it every 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. I'm not even joking. It was like you spray and then unclog. And I was almost like unclogging and spraying as I went.
Yeah, I noticed.
But it's on, and now we're gonna jack up the heat here. We're gonna run some fans because it is an air dried product. We're gonna like make sure there's a lot of air circulation so that it has the best chance of drying. I'm really glad we masked off everything, because I mean, this is messy. We got fans, we've got the heater, we got this heater. Problem with this one is like it keeps the cabin nice and warm, but it doesn't do a very good job circulating air into the V-berth. So we're gonna put a heater in there, we're gonna put fans in here, we're gonna like turn this thing into an oven for 2 days, and hopefully this will dry, and then maybe by the 4th or 5th or 6th layer we'll finally dial it in. Ugh. So, it's been 3 days since we sprayed this on, and yeah, we definitely have some issues with it.
This section here, like a light touch, and it just comes right off.
We have a lot of work to do to go in reverse and clean up what we messed up. We have to go through and scrape off everything that can be scraped off, and then do another coat.